morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this special called meeting of the Temple City Council. It's Thursday, August 15th. It's Thursday, August 29th. Please rise as Mayor Pro Tem Judy Morales leads us in the invocation, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Assistant City Manager Kim Phelps.
Please join me. Father, we thank you for this beautiful day and for all your blessings. We ask that you be with us, especially today as we go about the business of our city. We ask special blessings on our city employees, our citizens, and all those that live in our community. Help us and guide us to know the wisdom and the right things to do for the betterment of our community. We ask that you watch over all our people who are in harm's way, Father. Bless them, protect them. We ask again, Father, we thank you for all that you do for us and for your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is a public hearing to conduct a public hearing regarding the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2013 and ending September 30th, 2014, and consider adopting a resolution. A, which is ratifying the property tax increase reflected in the budget. This budget will raise more total property taxes in last year's budget by $1,258,667, or 6.44%, and of that amount, $531,737 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year. B, adopting the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2013 and ending September 30th, 2014, including the operating budget for 2013-2014, capital improvement plan, general government pay plan, and fiscal and investment policies. Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'd like to do is introduce the item. We've got, I think, maybe 4 or 5 slides very quickly, and they're just by way of introduction. And I did not include all of the calendar slides that we've gone over before in the process that started back in January, February of this year relating to the budget and the process. So I'm going to skip right to the items today and try to keep my comments very, very brief. We have 5 or 6 items before you today relative or relating to the budget. The first one is to conduct a public hearing, the final public hearing relating to the city's budget for the fiscal year ending in September of 2014. A couple of comments that I would make about this, and some of them are on the slide there, so I'll hit or highlight those first. The first bullet there says ratify a property tax increase. From a personal standpoint, I've never been comfortable with the language that the legislature mandates in terms of how that reads. Several things about that I have issues with. One of them is that it's very difficult for me to see how you can ratify something that you have not adopted yet. So that's my first issue with the legislature, is that you haven't adopted a tax rate or a tax increase or a tax anything yet. You don't do that until you vote. So ratifying something implies that you've already made a decision about that, and you have not. Thank you. I feel a little better about that now. Secondly, it talks about property tax increase. I have one more little event I guess I want to share. But property tax increase, it is a property tax revenue increase. It is not a property tax rate increase. The rate that is proposed in this budget is exactly the same rate as the current fiscal year. Yes, that does raise more tax revenue, but it is not, in my opinion, properly characterized as a property tax increase. And again, that is straight from the state legislature in terms of what we have to say, what we have to post, and even the motion that you have to read is dictated by the state legislature. Okay, again, I'm feeling a little better as we go on. Items before you adopt the city's budget, including our operating budget, our capital improvement plan, our general government pay plan, our fiscal and investment policies. All of those things are wrapped up in your city budget as they are every year. The public hearing, you will also conduct 2 public hearings in addition to the one relating to the budget. Public hearing approving the tax roll and authorizing the calculations associated with the tax, and then the public hearing and levying the taxes, and then officially setting the tax rate. And those are all three separate items. They're listed on your agenda, and again, those are mandated and dictated and prescribed precisely by state law, so we're following that process to the letter. You have, again, script in front of you that is dictated by state law relating to that. Finally, there's an item relating to adopting a resolution setting the charges for your residential solid waste services, and again, that item relates to our solid waste services and an increase in the solid waste monthly rate fees associated with our institution, proposed institution in January of 2014, the citywide curbside recycling services. So those are the items that you have in front of you. That's the one slide that I will highlight for you in terms of the overall budget. Again, you've seen that several times before, and we've talked about many of the items associated with that. But all of the revenues, overall, the revenues are projected to increase about 3.4% from the current fiscal year, and expenses a little bit less than that, about 2.94%. There's one other item that I wanted to highlight for you on your agenda that's not on the slide necessarily, but item 7, which is a resolution adopting the funding recommendations for public service agencies in FY 2014. As council is aware, there are multiple public service agencies that you fund through agreements and service agreements that we have looked at through the course of the budget. We have a process that we go through. Entities make applications, and then you hear those presentations during summertime, and then there are recommendations in the budget about who and how to fund, what levels to fund those organizations. This item is pulled from the budget strictly for voting purposes, so I don't have a staff presentation on that. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about that if you do have any associated with it, but it is really separated out for voting purposes so that one member can abstain from that discussion for conflicts of interest. Those are the budget items, and Mayor, if you'll permit, I think Tracy has got, we can do this any way you want. Tracy's got the, I think, one slide on each of the other items. She can run through those quickly, and then when you get to the public hearings, you don't necessarily need any more staff comment unless you desire to have that. Okay.
That would be just fine.
Okay.
Ms. Bernard?
Thank you, Dan. Agenda item number 4 is the property tax roll. The proposed ordinance will adopt the ad valorem property tax that's certified by Bell County Appraisal District, and the total amount of that is $3.7 billion. That is comprised of 3 components. It's the City of Temple values of $3.2 billion, frozen taxable value of $360 million, and then the tax reinvestment zone or tax increment district of $153 million, and that totals again $3.7 billion. Next slide, please. The property tax rate, as David mentioned earlier, the total tax rate proposed is 58.64 cents per $100 valuation. The tax rate has 2 components: the maintenance and operation component, which is 33.24 cents, and the debt or interest and sinking rate is 25.4 cents. Also, again, Mr. Blackburn mentioned the increase in the solid waste residential rate. It's the resolution before you will increase from $15.80 a month to $16.20. That's an increase of 40 cents. And this rate increase is to start up an incremental annual cost associated with the implementation of the citywide residential curbside recycling program. Again, this is the summary of your agenda. There's 4 items related to the budget, the tax rate and the tax roll, and then the item, the resolution on the solid waste services rate. I'd be happy to address any questions now or later as you go through the items. Thank you.
Council? Questions?
Mayor, just in closing, from staff comments anyway, just remember you have several separate items, and you are required to address those after your public hearings individually, and then you also have specific motions that you need to read, assuming you want to move forward with them. Thank you.
And you know I would probably mess up on at least one of these. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. There being no comments, I will declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on item A. Remember, we do have specific language that we must use.
I move that the property tax increase reflected in the budget be approved. This budget will raise more total property taxes than last year's budget by $1,258,667, 6.44%. And of that amount, $531,737 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year.
You have a second? Second. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. And council, your pleasure on item B.
I move that the budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2013, and ending September 30th, 2014, including the operating budget for 2013-2014, capital improvement program, general government pay plan, fiscal and budgetary policy, and investment policy be adopted.
Second.
No further discussion. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. Item 4A, the first and final reading and public hearing, consider adopting an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for the tax year 2013, fiscal year 2014, to be considered on an emergency basis. And we've already seen a presentation by the staff. Council, do you have any questions or comments? At this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. There being no comments, I will declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first and final reading of this ordinance.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. Item 5, first and final reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance levying taxes and setting a tax rate for the city for tax year 2013, making the appropriation for the regular operation of the city to be considered on an emergency basis. We also had a presentation by staff on this. Council, do you have any questions or comments? At this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. There being no comments, I will declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first and final reading of this ordinance. And I'll entertain a motion on the first part.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .5864 cents per $100 valuation, which is effectively a 4.66% increase in the tax rate. Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. And I will entertain a motion on the second part.
I move that the ordinance setting the 2013-2014 tax rate in the amount of .5864 per $100 valuation comprised of .3324 for maintenance operation and .2540 for debt service be adopted.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. Item 6, consider adopting a resolution setting the collection charges for residential solid waste services. We've also had this presentation from staff. Council, do you have any discussion? Questions?
At 40 cents pays for that over a 10-year period, correct? It's the
Yes.
life expectancy of the can.
For the capital cost, yes. And also replenishes replacement.
Have a motion?
Motion to approve item 6 is stated.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Item 7, consider adopting a resolution approving the funding recommendations for public service agencies for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. We've already had this presentation as well. Council, is there any further discussion? May I have a motion?
Motion to approve item 7 is read.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Morales?
Abstain.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. And we have a very special thing to do right now. Item 8 is, I would like Miranda Drake, where did she go? There. Yeah, you know from just a second. If you'd come down here, Miranda is a senior accountant, and we are recognizing her 20 years of service with the city. Mr. Blackburn, will you join me down here? Tracy, you want to come down here? Just Collins? I'm not so sure she wanted to. You want to just do the whole time. Congratulations, and if I may read this proclamation to you. Whereas the City Council, city staff, and all city employees are honored to recognize Miranda Drake on this occasion of expressing our sincere appreciation for her many years of dedicated service to the City of Temple. Whereas Miranda began her career in 1993 working in the IT department, then transferred over to the street department before finally finding her niche in the finance department, where she has shared her knowledge and dedication for the past 18 years. Whereas Miranda has been a key component of the budget process from development, adoption, and execution to compliance. During the budget development process, Miranda spent many long hours making sure everything was in order. Whereas Miranda has a strong passion for all that she does, and she is a perfect example of taking the following quote to heart: "Strive for perfection. Take the best that exists and make it better. If it doesn't exist, create it. Accept nothing merely right or good enough." Whereas it is an honor to recognize and express our deepest appreciation to Miranda Drake for her hard work and for having shared so many great years with the City of Temple. Now therefore I, Daniel A. Dunn, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby recognize Miranda Drake for her outstanding service and dedication to the citizens of Temple, and I encourage all citizens to join together in recognizing Miranda for her many invaluable contributions to the City of Temple, and we all wish her well in all of her future endeavors. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, on this, the 29th day of August, 2013. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mayor.
Notice you didn't fix it when I was...
He's got very loud.
That for my mother's benefit.
That's okay. I'll just
Pretend.
No, I don't. First of all, Miranda, thank you. I left Miranda a note this morning on her desk, a little bit more personal than what I'm about to read, but the gist of it was that she really can't leave and that she's got to come back and help us with the budget next year, because I'm really not sure how we're going to do the budget. My whole time that I've been here, almost 10 years now, Miranda has been just, to say key or integral or whatever words we use in the proclamation, is a understatement. She has just been the person, the go-to person, from my standpoint anyway, finance for delivering and putting together a budget. Tracy, Melissa, and a whole cast of folks over there certainly work on the budget, but Miranda, from my standpoint, anytime I had a question or an issue, especially in, seems like in June, July timeframe, when we were up here on Saturdays, I could walk down the hallway and I'd find her in her office working on the budget. So I very much appreciate the dedication, the effort that she put into the budget and the budget process. But she really did it, I think, because she had a heart and has a heart for the city and for the employees that work here. And everything she did, I thought, reflected that. So I want to say thank you very much from my standpoint for all the help that you provided to me in certainly making me look better than I really am. So, in honor of our service, Miranda Drake retired with distinction from the City of Temple Finance Department May 3rd, 1993 to August 29, 2013. It was kind of hard to say Drake, too. I just want you to know that. I didn't know who that was. A time to look back with admiration, and that's very true, and a time to look forward with anticipation. The mayor, city secretary, and myself have all signed that, and then also, as again, just a small token of our appreciation and something maybe you can put on your new desk to remember us by. It's just a city coin, so that you can hopefully from time to time reflect on your time here. But thank you very much for your service. Thank you. All right. I offered the microphone to Tracy, but she said no, that she wouldn't be able She said she would not be able to get through it, so I will respect that, but you see all your finance companions in the audience there, and I know they also appreciate, as well as other members of the city that are here, so again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And as I'm walking back, I just would like to say thank you to everybody in the finance department for the past, 11 months of working on this year's budget. I think the first time the council saw it, we were in a retreat, and quite honestly, some of us didn't know if we would be around here at this time. And it's countless hours, days of your work and every other department putting work on the budget, and we just think so much of you and appreciate everything you do. And Tracy, thank you and everything that you continue to do for the city.
Thank you.
Now we have a discussion item with no action. To receive an update and discuss downtown rail safety zones.
Thank you, Mayor. I have, again, just a few slides, really only a handful, but I'm going to try to do this very quickly so that really what I'm looking for today is just some comment. There's not an action item or decision item for council today, but I am looking for some discussion and at least some general thoughts that individually you might want to share in terms of the direction that we might have or might not have relative to the downtown rail safety zone. Okay, next slide, please. Recall the primary objective, and this started really several years ago with discussions with many stakeholders in the community, but one of the primary stakeholders was the Temple Downtown Alliance, and I'm not sure if that's the correct term today, but it was the Downtown Association, and asking them and dialogue with them through multiple entities, Reinvestment Zone, I think TDC, the city, chamber, multiple entities, conversations about what were their priorities, what were the issues and concerns that they had for downtown, and how could the city help advance and support those. And one of the top things, if not the top thing that came across the table was trying to increase the safety of the rail crossings downtown. And we have, I'll show you a map here in just a second of where 3 of them are anyway. And so that was the primary objective. So I just kind of want to put that back on the table to refresh everybody about why we were involved in this to begin with. Second slide, please. Those are the 3 crossings, or the 3 areas that I'm going to hone in on here in just a little bit closer detail here in just a second. The First Street, can't read my screen, First Street, Main Street, and then MLK, which is off to the right. I don't have a pointer. But if you look across that screen from left to right, you'll see where those are. That's okay. Next slide. The downtown safety zones, and again, we went through a study process and worked with several parties, including BNSF and others, and it identified some improvements that would need to be made if we were going to create a safety zone or safety zones in those areas. And the general gist of the safety zones is to try to limit or mitigate unauthorized crossings at the tracks. And you can do that a variety of ways. We chose, or the study recommended, putting some medians in place at 2 of the interchanges to try to mitigate again against folks going around barricades, and then closure of the First Street interchange. Next slide, please. And this just zooms in on, I think that's MLK, and the improvements that would be made to MLK in terms of the crossing. Next slide. That zooms in on Main Street, and again, the improvements that would be made there, again, to try to mitigate some of the illegal crossings that might occur. And then the last slide, or next slide, please. And that's First Street, and that's a closure. So that would mean First Street would be closed under recommendations from the zone, from the report. Next slide. Very briefly, the timeline, and I'll walk through this a little bit just because it does bear some mention, but back in October of 2011, the reinvestment zone accepted the downtown rail safety zone report and made recommendations to council. In some period of time passed after that, you see a gap there between October and May of 2012. Part of the reason there was a gap there was that as I recall, and I also have David Patrick with KPA in the room who has done quite a bit of work on the study and can answer any technical questions you might have about why or cost estimates or those kinds of things. And then we also have some engineering staff in the room also that can assist. But my memory of that time period there was that there was some additional cost information, and I think it was cost information that I had asked for that really asked if we left First Street open, what would be the cost associated with that. And the first report only had recommendations and cost estimates with closure of First Street and then improvements, mitigation improvements to MLK and Main Street. So it took a few months to go back and do those cost estimates. So that's why there was a little bit of gap there. We got revised cost estimates. Then in October of last year, we did a public meeting. After those cost estimates were received in May, June timeframe, somewhere in there, council received those, and then there was some dialogue and discussion. I think we had a workshop, maybe a couple, can't recall, and direction was given to have a public meeting on that so that we could get some public input associated with what stakeholders in the community might think about the recommendations from the report. So that occurred in October, and then also in October, after that public meeting, council adopted the downtown rail safety zone report. Adopting that report included moving forward to the recommendations to close First Street. Now, at that time, the cost, I think we're being a little bit kind there, perhaps, to say the costs were unknown from BNSF, but there were no costs associated at that point in time from BNSF for the closure of First Street, and our estimates were around $450,000 for the work that would be done at all 3 interchanges. So council passed that, or adopted that resolution, and we began to move forward with it. In June of this year, BN advised us that there was some revised cost estimates, and based on those revised cost estimates, the cost had escalated from around $500,000 to, if you included the construction cost and their initial cost estimate for leaving First Street open, we would be around $1.9 million or so. Very significant increases that were identified by BNSF. So at that point in time, I indicated that we needed to pause and have some discussion because the cost estimates went from, in essence, no cost estimates from BNSF to $1.3 million. And so I wanted to have some discussions with BN about how and why and more specifics. So I requested a meeting. I also requested at that meeting that they revise those cost estimates in conjunction with some work that they were already scheduling for the interchanges that was independent of whether the city moves forward with the rail safety zone recommendations or not. And they agreed to go back and take another look at their cost estimates to see if there could be some savings and efficiencies by the 2 entities by doing the project jointly versus them doing their work and we doing our work separately. That occurred last month, middle of last month, when that meeting was with BNSF. Next slide. In August 9th, I did get a revised cost estimate from BNSF. The cost estimate went down to about $460,000 $33,000 from what was originally $1.3 and $800,000. They still requested or required or conditioned, is maybe a better way to say it, that cost estimate for the project to be conditioned upon closure of First Street, and they also advised that that needed to occur on that date anyway, no later than 7 days later. At that point, I also advised BN that I needed a little bit more time because I needed to have a collective briefing with council and see if council's opinion or thoughts were to move forward with the project or not. So I corresponded with them. Next slide. So between the 9th and the 16th of this month, I've been talking to BNSF trying to obtain that extension of time. On August 23rd, I did get word that they would extend the deadline to reply, for me to reply to them about their offer until after this meeting. And so that's where we are, and we're at a decision point, or I'm at a decision point today in terms of whether or not we want to move forward with this project or not. I think I have 2 more slides real quickly, but that's kind of a real quick timeline of something that's really gone earlier than that. Reinvestment Zone leadership has indicated they continue to support this project as the highest priority in the downtown area, and that they can identify funding within their Reinvestment Zone financing plan to cover the costs that BNSF has identified with the project. RZ leadership has also indicated that they believe it's critical for downtown redevelopment efforts for these safety enhancements to be engaged. And my recommendation to you is to go forward with the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and again, I have consulting engineer Mr. Patrick is here, and then a couple of members of Public Works that can also answer any technical questions you might have about the work or the cost or those kinds of things. I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer a level of detail relative to BN's cost numbers, but the impression that I have and the discussions that I've had with BN on those are they are what they are, and I don't know that they're subject to any further negotiation. I think that number is where they're going to settle on. So with that, be happy to address you or answer any questions.
Just to be clear, before, all 3 projects, all 3 closures was $450,000. No BN cost. And now we're talking $433,000 from BN and still $450,000 our cost for the 3 closures.
That's correct. The initial estimates that, and again, I'm going to let David jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but the initial estimates were $450,000. We did not have any cost estimates or costing considerations from BN when that was presented to the RZ Zone or to the council back last year. After those estimates, after the resolution and after our estimates, and as we started to move forward with our work, we were advised that there were some cost and work that BN would need to do, and that we have to contract in essence with or pay BN to do the work. We don't bid the work, we don't contract for the work. It's done by BNSF crews, and it's done under their union and labor contract rates. Is that close, David, or you want to correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. We first initiated the study prior to October of 2011. Prior to 11, when we started that, we contacted BN, the Public Works Manager who deals with the quiet zones, safety zones within the state of Texas, and had to inquire about the constant warning circuitry to see what crossings had it, what didn't have it, so that we knew what our costs were going to be going into this. At that time, they told us that MLK, Main Street had constant warning circuitry in there that would meet the rules of the quiet zones. First Street did not. That's one of the reasons we looked at the closure of First Street. The other was the pedestrian way from Santa Fe Depot. But at a later date, after the report was submitted, we were completed, they came back and said they re-looked at it and it now does not meet it. The constant warning circuitry is in there, and they told us before that it wasn't their newest circuitry that was in there, but it would meet the requirements. Then came back and said it wouldn't, and so BNSF costs came into play at that point.
So, just in terms of cost estimates, the number that you see, I probably could have made this a little clearer on the slides, but the recommendation from the reinvestment zone, my recommendation is the top or the second sub-bullet under 61013, which is, one up right there. Again, I can't read that from here. I'm sorry, 8-9, I can't see, I just tried to see from here, and I don't have my screen down. 433, 236? This is like an eye doctor.
236.
Plus 450, those two numbers total together is what our estimates are for the cost.
That's not just First Street, that's all three
Yes, sir.
projects.
Yes, sir. And again, the reason I'm bringing this back to council, just for some, again, just whatever comments that you have, I do have a council resolution on file that said move forward with the project. My intent, again, I put a pause on that based on these cost estimates that came in after that resolution was passed. And I just wanted to have at least one opportunity for you to voice any comments about that prior to me moving forward with the project per the council resolution that was passed. Because I think the council resolution that was passed with a different cost estimate in mind, and that may or may not impact your decision-making process or your thoughts relative to this matter. So that's why it's here before you.
My comment would, of course, it's unfortunate that the project is doubled in cost, basically, for all three intersections, but, that's something that the reinvestment zone's worked hard on as far as the linear park and the whole future of downtown in that area, and obviously, I wouldn't want to spend another $400,000, but it kind of appears if this is our window to do that, and if we decline, that cost could go up, because would be basically at the hands of the BNSF at that point again, if we brought it up at a different date. And we had a bunch of people here before that was obviously in support of this deal, and about downtown businesses and what have you, and there are these big time behind it. So I would say would probably need to move on with it, would be my recommendation. I know it's not a vote, but that'd be kind of my recommendation.
After looking at the cost and the changes, also look at the bigger picture. Talked to a lot of business people downtown and talked with several other people, RZ people, and trying to get a better picture, because that's a lot of money. But looking at the future growth and the economic development of downtown and all the areas that they want to expand on, going into East Temple as well, we really need to look at, first of all, safety, but also economic development. And the growth that we expect to have in the future. And as much as it costs now, I think if we don't do something to preserve that now, it might cost a lot more later and also hinder growth in the future.
I was the one person that voted against this last time, and really it was an issue for a lot of my constituents at the time, and the reasons that they gave me are really the same reasons that I had a problem with. It's the history of Temple, what trains for the history of Temple, closure of First Street, and the cost. And so it would be difficult, it would be difficult almost a year later for me to change my mind when nothing of that has changed and the cost has only gotten greater. So.
A couple of questions regarding it. I guess refresh my memory. These are the only crossings, or at-grade crossings, I guess, between Industrial Boulevard to the north and to the south would be, I guess, at Oscar Road on BNSF. Then if you go back to the west would be 25th Street. So really the majority of the crossings in town will be taken care of, or grade crossings. Is that correct?
Again, I don't have a map. I look for PW or Mr. Patrick to address that, but I think that's right. I think that's right.
And Santa Fe's ranking of safety or whatever, this would put the intersection safer than the existing conditions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And especially on First Street if that is closed.
That is correct.
I kind of hate to use the word taken hostage on this or whatever because of the increased cost And some of it, or majority of it is BNSF, but I agree that this is something that we had voted to proceed with in the past. The costs are more, but I think this is a window of opportunity that we need to proceed on with. And also, just to confirm, but these additional costs or funds will come from the reinvestment zone budgets and not anything from the general budget of the city, is that correct?
That's correct.
Everybody's looking at me, so I guess I need to...
I was just your head.
Not knocking accurate.
Budget's tough.
I believe that downtown's at a tipping point, and again, I know the RZ has spent a lot of time over the last few years going over this, and this is one of their top projects that they feel will tip downtown to where it's more of an advantage to Temple than a disadvantage, or it will draw businesses, it will draw tenants. And I think that with the work that we're trying to do with connecting East Temple, into the downtown area with the park, etc. Again, I think this is probably it won't be the only time to do it, but I think it's the best time to do it. I would be sure.
Well, again, I appreciate everybody's comments. Again, I just kind of wanted to bring this back in front of you, even though the resolution was already passed and approved, but there have been some things happen since then, so I do appreciate the comments. That's helpful. We'll move forward with it. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
There's no further business. We are adjourned.